Oh. Well, we'd have to put up the project. I think if we have time.
So let's do this. Just in the interest of time, because we have the other speakers and videos, we'll come back to it, and we'll be able to hopefully just go up to that part.
All right, so moving on in our heavily armored division, we have Prakash coming up to talk about what's on the horizon so that we can fully declare a winner.
Hello, everybody. This is Prakash Gatta. I want to thank the session chairs for inviting me to the presentation and allowing me to research this. There's obviously a lot of energy in this room and a lot of interest. So these are my disclosures. It's very interesting that I got to research this, but I don't think the robots of tomorrow are going to look like the tanks of the movies or World War II. They're going to be more subtle. I wanted to focus my talk on some pre-FDA approved devices that have a finished product and have a ton of investment and a lot of investment energy in it. I was always nervous that there would be a lot of duplication from our prior speakers, but there's not too much of that. I'm also trying to not make this look like a bunch of infomercials, but there is some video that I want you to see, which gives you the concept of some of these newer designs and newer concepts. First one is virtual incision. So virtual incision is basically a handheld device with two working arms, and you would place the two working arms as well as the camera, which it comes with, into the abdomen. This is the video of what it actually looks like. It has an articulation, essentially a wrist and an elbow, no shoulder, and you'll understand why I say that in a subsequent video. It's table mounted, so it has that ability. This is Dr. Olenikov, who is a CMO, and we know him quite well. A very interesting concept, came out of Nebraska. Now they actually have a booth in the industry area today. So this is pre-FDA. Now I think they did the first case under an investigational device agreement through the FDA for pre-approval. It was a right colon, so that came out in the press a couple months ago. So the next one is something called Vicarious Surgery. After these first 2 or 3 videos of companies, I want you to see that there's a pattern here with some of the new robotic concept designs. So here's Vicarious. Can you play the audio by any chance? So going back to the transvaginal video that we just saw, if you look at the similar concept where this particular robot,
with just one simple incision to open and close, Vicarious streamlines trocar placement and accelerates procedures. The Vicarious robot can approach the same target from any angle with trocar-centered motion. This multi-axis motion capability enables the robot to be repositioned anywhere throughout the abdomen. With versatile trocar placement, the entire abdomen is accessible. Vicarious combines its miniaturized ultra-high definition camera and robotic arms with virtual reality to unlock an unprecedented model of human-computer interaction. Moving the camera is as natural as...
So very difficult to put that in slides, so I wanted to play the video. The point was they've combined a very interesting idea. They've combined virtual reality headsets with a camera that basically can fold onto itself. And we've just seen that from a prior presentation, this transvaginal robot where the articulation has been refined and developed so much that it folds back on itself. There's a binocular camera with VR capability. Very interesting concept, and we've got some very big players who are funding these projects, including Bill Gates, BD, which is a mesh company, interest in robotic surgery now, and multiple other players. This is now a public company, and if you guys know what a SPAC is, this is one of those companies that came through with a SPAC merger just about a month ago. It's very interesting to research how much energy and money there is in these newer designs. Here's Titan Medical. This is a company you guys have heard of for like 10 years, maybe 15, always considered a competitor for Intuitive, never had a platform. It's Toronto-based. I want to show you what this looks like.
Visualization of the instruments entering the body. The 3D camera then provides a complete view of the surgical field. The multi-articulating instruments provide full dexterity and triangulation needed for performing surgery. Instruments can be easily exchanged using the buttons on the central unit as needed. For cleaning, the endoscope camera can be easily removed and cleaned, and then reinserted back into the abdominal cavity. Titan's single-port robotics system focuses on ease of use and efficiency in setup and system operation for an optimal surgical experience.
So if you note the first three videos, I played three different companies. Same concept. This is there's a lot of robotics interest apparently now for transabdominal surgery done through one incision. So this is similar to the SP platform that Intuitive came up with a couple of years ago, but the newer designs, the newer concepts, the designers of these newer, more competing platforms seem to be moving away from multi-port, which is what the current FDA and CE approved platforms are. So that I thought was interesting in my own research, that Titan moved completely away from their initial concept. This is the first year they actually have shown some revenue because they've licensed some licensing revenue to Medtronic. They got $20 million, which would help their borrowing costs as well as their ability to do further research. Appear to be very close to an actual product release. So this is interesting. Ottava is the newest. I don't have a video to play for you, but I do have a very interesting video in the next slide. Ottava is a concept. I'm sure they spend millions of dollars to come up with that name, but I think this is the iteration of Johnson & Johnson / Google and their product, which was initially called Verb Surgical. It went through a merger with Auris. Auris was founded by Fred Moll. There's a lot of details here. Fred Moll was the co-founder of Intuitive Surgical, so there's a lot of brain power with that. Only happening last year, they came up with a new name for their Johnson & Johnson robot. But you can see this is the only publicly available picture of the concept. I've been fortunate to be able to see it. But you can see that the concept is different. The different concept here for J&J is essentially what appears to be a table-mounted robot. So you would walk into the room, not see the robot, and you press a button, and the robotic arms would come out. So very interesting that there's another company based out in Cambridge, and there's a lot of robotics happening in Cambridge, that has also table-mounted concept. Potentially the Ottava, the robot may look like this, where you have one robotic arm as a camera, and you have three working arms in order to perform multi-quadrant surgery. And in line with the modular concept, look at the competition being Intuitive and the big footprint of the robotic patient cart. If you tuck the arms away underneath the patient bed, maybe is considered to be a competitive advantage. And you can move it from room to room because there will be no robotic room per se. And if all of us who are robotic surgeons and we struggle for robotic block time, there is no robot room, and essentially modular concept where you can move from room to room is an advantage, I would say. So Medrobotics is a flexible robot essentially designed for ENT. So they have FDA approval for transoral procedures, and it was on that initial slide with all those robotic companies out there, but they're pending FDA approval for transabdominal. And I can tell you the concept appears to be quite promising. Let me play you a video. It does have two working arms in addition to the camera, and the controls of the working arms very similar to a laparoscopic grasper, so not that much of a difference, and significant articulation, as opposed to Vicarious system, which has a shoulder, an elbow, and a wrist. The Titan Medical, as well as the Medrobotic articulating instruments, have multiple joints. So it's not just the three joints, it's multiple joints to provide that articulation. That seems to be the difference between these concepts. And if you look at the schematic, you can see that there's one patient cart, again, sort of a single site system, and there's a vision cart. There does not appear to be a working tower, as you would with the Intuitive system. The surgeon is sitting. This is obviously targeted towards ENT, where you're close to the patient, but I would conceptualize that the transabdominal approach would be very similar. Now, we've talked about transenterics. I can't really add to that. I do think that this is sort of an interesting video, which I realize that it is now FDA and CE approved. There's been some changes from when I first started preparing for the talk. Very interesting that Transenterix essentially has been around for a couple of years, and how they've evolved their approach to using the haptic feedback, which is a big selling point. Did not have articulation until recently, adding to that. So people would ask, huge footprint in terms of the 3 different parts or 4 different parts of the robot. What is the advantage if there's no articulation? And I think their answer to that is using augmented intelligence, as well as haptic feedback, as well as a way to evaluate the surgeon's performance, is probably where their market share is going to grow. And if you look at any robotic system as if you consider it having a motor as well as a sensory component, right now we use the intuitive system, and most of what we get is motor function. That means the surgeon's controlling the robot and a master slave. Think of the robot as a sensory system as well. It has a sensory component where not only are you getting visual feedback and binocular, you're also getting augmented reality, ICG angiography, and a bunch of other data. So the robot is, quote, feeling the inside of the abdomen and translating that to the surgeon. That appears to be the augmentation that we're looking for, potentially, or at least if you are in a competitive market and you want to build market share, that's one of the things you want to do. So Hugo is Medtronic's entry into robotics. It is not FDA approved yet. I would say that the biggest medical device makers, J&J and Medtronic, have been late to the game, primarily because they have not felt their market share dropping. With Intuitive starting to make their own trocars a few years ago, that's a huge part of their business. Now, the advantage that J&J or Medtronic would have, even though they're dissimilar systems, you can see here there's also a modular concept similar to CMR. The advantage that they have is leverage with hospital systems because they have mesh contracts and suture contracts, and they can roll in newer technology, with a slight modification. It is not a niche player, but they have arrived. And if you have the chance, Medtronic does have a Hugo system here. If you can get on that list to be able to play with it, certainly something worth your time. Open concept console. It's dissimilar from the Intuitive console, and all of the robotic systems appear to have similar 3D camera with a flat screen. So it seems to be something they want to go away from. So CMR, similar modular concept in terms of how it looks like. The footprint appears to be slightly different from Hugo, but it's similar where you roll it in, and if the problem they're trying to solve is cost, maybe this is the answer with the lease and purchase price of a new robotic system being significant. But you can look at Hugo and CMR and Intuitive as multi-quadrant, multi-port systems other than the SP, but some of the newer systems appear to have been evolving into single-port systems with the triangulation that it brings. So this, for any vascular surgeons out there, I thought this was an interesting video to put on where there is a, quote, robot that allows you to traverse an area that you need to stent or clip. There is a cartridge that gets replaced after access to the blood vessel. And the surgeon then steps away, goes behind the console, is able to stand behind a radiation shield and remotely, while being in the same room, be able to visualize how the stent is being placed and do the fluoroscopy that they need to do. So I thought this was interesting, and I thought having that in there would be helpful. In terms of orthopedics, lots of energy. In terms of particularly knee replacement, all the big players have a part, and they're coming out with new concepts. A couple of quick things I wanted to say. We spoke about automation. I would say automation and robotics, similar to cars, is incremental. And at some point, I believe there will be a need to sort of internalize it once the concepts in the market is mature, to figure out how automation happens. And there's a couple of companies working on this. Really quickly, in the same paper, you could see how you train a robot to be automated. It is using sensors, haptic sensors, optic sensors, as well as the ability to essentially learn the surgeon's functionality. The, quote, muscle memory that we use is something that the concept is trainable for robotic systems. We will never get to this point very soon. The point is we will. And these are robots, very interesting, again, Boston-based company called Boston Dynamics. One of my favorite songs. The point is, coordination is possible, and you can train the robots to do a lot. Welcome to Vegas.